Welcome back to Movies TV Mad and Saturday's edition already. Saturday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Hold the front pages. Black Canary DC movie in the works with Birds of Prey actress returning. HBO Max is in early development on a Black Canary solo film starring Birds of Prey's Journey Smollett and written by Lovecraft Country's Misha Green by Cooper Hood or Screen Rant. Journey Smollett is returning for a Black Canary HBO Max film written by Lovecraft Country's Misha Green. Warner Brothers and DC Films are DC Films are starting to increase their production output on multiple fronts. There is a full slate of theatrical films extending into 2023, but HBO Max will also be the home to a few different exclusive films. Batgirl and Blue Beetle are two confirmed movies set in the DC Extended Universe that will launch on the streaming service, with several other dceu TV shows in development too. The avenue HBO Max provides WB and DC with to create more content has led to various calls for new projects to be part of the streaming service. It was already the home of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and fans continue to clamour for the aircut of Suicide Squad 2, but there have also been fan movements for anything from Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke to Ben Affleck's The Batman to be reimagined as HBO Max exclusives. Black Canary became another popular choice for a character who could work well on HBO Max, but no solo project with Journey Smollett's Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous and Emancipation of One Harley Quinn was known to be in the works before. Now, there's more to this article and we'll read it. This was always going to happen, by the way. This is what the fans wanted. A DC Comics writer said it's because two great women made this happen, Misha Green and Journey Smollett. They are two great and talented women, but they're not the pure reason this is happening. It's because of the fans. The fans made their voices heard. It has now been revealed that a Black Canary movie is in early development at HBO Max. The report originates from CineLinks and has since been supported by Collider's own sources. Journey Smollett is slated to return as Dinah Lance in the HBO Max original movie. By the way, Journey and Misha have both confirmed this is happening. Smollett and Green previously worked together on HBO's Lovecraft Country. The reports note that it could be a while before Black Canary happens due to Green's busy schedule. Yes, Misha is very, very busy at the moment. You will have to wait a while. I'm sure by next year they'll go into production of this. The emergence of a solo Black Canary movie is something fans have been hoping for ever since Birds of Prey was released last year. Journey Smollett's portrayal of the DC hero immediately connected with viewers and made her a fan favourite addition to the DCEU. Originally a trending hashtag called for Smollett to star in a Black Canary HBO Max series. While this isn't a series, the solo project is nevertheless an exciting conclusion to this fan movement. Even though Green has a full plate of projects ahead of her, hopefully it won't be too long before her Black Canary script is ready so the project can move forward. Yeah, it's very interesting with projects being announced because sometimes they're pushed forward, they're pushed back. I'm assuming this will be pushed in front of Misha Green's queue. With Black Canary's DCEU story now set to continue, it will be fascinating to see how connected or separate the project is from Birds of Prey and other upcoming projects. This could be a great place to see Mary Elizabeth Winstead's Huntress, Rosie Perez's Renee Montoya, and Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn return. Never going to happen, by the way, but anyway, perhaps Black Canary will even be the project that brings Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow, to the DCEU. Please, find a way to make it Stephen Amell. Just make it Stephen Amell. I don't care how. Especially now that Stephen Amell has hung up the bow for the CW. Now fans will just have to wait for more updates on Black Canary to see how quickly it develops. Let's get a few things straight here. This movie spin-off for Black Canary, aka Journey Smollett, is not an indication all of a sudden Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn is a great successful movie. There were two great things about the movie: Journey Smollett's Black Canary and Ewan McGregor's Black Mask. Now obviously, unless Flashpoint can do something here, we won't see Ewan as this character again, but Flashpoint could certainly make that happen. So, a few interesting pointers here. Will it have anything to do with Birds of Prey? Is this going to be the same Black Canary from Birds of Prey, or will Flashpoint move her away from that film, or will there be kind of little I suppose, Easter eggs from that movie? And Misha's writing it, but not necessarily directing it. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens here. So this is a movie. Because of Flashpoint kind of conflicts everything, because it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a direct kind of Black Canary from the Birds of Prey movie, or that we're going to get the other characters from Birds of Prey. This could be a standalone movie, but I doubt it. So it will have connections, but connections to what? Connections to the DCEU? Is this a Black Canary from DCEU Earth 1 or from another Earth? Even though we are now getting this Journey Smollett Black Canary movie, I don't believe she's going to be the only Black Canary within the DC live-action universe. I believe that in the Central Universe, when we reboot it, we may even get another one. Or it could be her, because she has originated in the DCEU Earth 1, so it could be her. But on other Earths, even on kind of Matt Reeves' Earth, we could have another more comic book accurate version of Black Canary, because Journey's Black Canary is nothing like the one in the comics. Not really. There's little touches from the comics, but not much. And hopefully she wears a decent comic accurate costume this time. With who's writing it, that may not happen. Am I excited about this? I'm very excited about this. But I was fully aware that there was a big probability that this would happen. There's so many fan movements in terms of DC right now, and I've always said, even on here, this was the most realistic one of happening. So we will have to wait a bit longer for this, but it's a very exciting turn of events. I think it's awesome. It's exactly what I want. I want to see all these things, and we go back to Ann Sarnoff's Variety article back in March. This is exactly what she said was going to happen. That they, as a studio, was different department heads sitting in a room together, making sure one head was talking to the other, that we would have DC characters on HBO Max and cinematically crossing over with each other as well. So who knows who she could cross over with from the DCEU. So this is a very exciting announcement. I'm very, very happy about it, and I'd love to know from you in the comments below what you think of this. I think most of you are going to be very, very happy. I think this is a confirmation of what we already knew. And what other projects from fan campaigns could we get next? Well, there is a really big feeling now that the Air Cut will be coming to HBO Max, and we will get an announcement at DC Fandom. We will have to wait and see for that, but Journey Smollett is reprising her role as Black Canary, and it's very, very exciting. How DC's Green Lantern show differs from the 2011 movie, according to Star. DC and HBO Max's Green Lantern star Finn Wittrock explains how the new show will be different from the failed 2011 Ryan Reynolds film by Paul Shirley of Screen Rant. Actor Finn Wittrock explains how the new HBO Max Green Lantern series will differ from the 2011 Ryan Reynolds film. Wittrock was recently cast as Guy Gardner, to say that word again, the tempestuous Green Lantern with a bowl cut. Created by John Broome and Jill Kane in 1968 for the Green Lantern 59, Gardner has appeared only once in live action form, appearing in the pilot for Justice League of America in 1997. The show is produced by Arrowverse creator Greg Berlanti, with Seth Grahame-Smith serving as showrunner. Details are sparse on what the show will be about, but it's rumoured to take an anthology approach to the longer history of the Green Lantern Corps, allowing them to explore numerous members of the group. By the way, these are not rumours. It will span decades. It will focus on different decades. This is going to be an epic Green Lantern story, and I'm very excited for it. The 2011 Green Lantern feature film, directed by Martin Campbell and starring Ryan Reynolds, is famously known for its failure at the box office, a thread that is commonly pulled and teased by Reynolds himself. Campbell has recently spoken out about the film's failures, blaming much of it on WB, but also taking his share of the blame, saying he never should have done the film to begin with. I agree. It was a terrible pick for a person to direct a Green Lantern movie. He's a great director, he's done great with Bond movies, but Green Lantern, nah. While fans have often called for Reynolds to return to the role, WB seems to have moved on from that prospect, instead focusing on this new iteration on HBO Max. By the way, there is still a movie being planned, which I believe will be announced at DC Fandom. And by the way, Ryan Reynolds could reprise his role as an older Hal Jordan. It's something I suggested for Robert Downey Jr. as well. That would be very exciting, and he'd be training kind of a young John Stewart. I think that would be awesome. Comments below, let me know what you think about that. Wittrock has now spoken up about the comparisons of the new Green Lantern show and the 2011 film, saying to EW that he believes it will be its own new interpretation. The actor says that the film had a lot of story to fit into the runtime, and that with HBO Max they'll have more space to tell the story on a big scale. Ultimately, the show will be a different animal than Ryan Reynolds' incarnation. Read Wittrock's full quote below. Before we do, we got no Hal Jordan in this movie. In this series on HBO Max. So, of course it's different. There shouldn't be any comparisons here, but the media and journalists simply can't help themselves. In some ways, it's almost better. I think it offers a chance to reinvent the whole thing, and you're not going to have, no offense to the movie, it is what it is, but you're not going to have people who are dying for the creation of that movie. The show can be its own new interpretation. Well, by the way, people are crying for an interpretation of Green Lantern, my friend. You know, you lot are going to be under a lot of pressure. Green Lantern is a very popular IP. Not he, but the whole kind of IP, all the Green Lanterns, OR, that whole world is loved. So, we will be putting on the pressure to make sure you do a good job here. He says, continuing, there's a lot of story there. I think maybe it was just too much to fit into a movie. I agree. We have the time and space, thanks to HBO, to really explore a lot of it on a big scale. I think it's going to be a different animal, to be honest. I'm so excited. Hearing everything that's been said about this project, really excited. And if we can have this Green Lantern show on HBO Max, which we will, and the Green Lantern core movie, and they can cross over, because, you're going to have John Stewart probably and Hal Jordan in the movie, and all these different characters in the TV show, one universe could be created here. Green Lantern is DC's Star Wars, and you can do something very, very special with the right people running this. And I believe the right people are running the TV show. Certainly Reynolds is not suffering from the misfire that was the 2011 Green Lantern film. You know what? I like Paul Shervey, I do. He's a really good guy. He does his own stuff as well as on Screen Rant. But at the end of the day, the constant comparisons to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, with the previous Suicide Squad, this Green Lantern Corps series with the Ryan Reynolds 2011 film, is lazy and misguided. Having carved out a successful role with Marvel's Deadpool, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about Ryan Reynolds. Stop it. They always have to bring Marvel into the equation. And now with Disney's Free Guy, Reynolds famously poked fun at his ambitions for Green Lantern in the ending of Deadpool 2, where Wade Wilson travels back in time and shoots Reynolds just as he's about to read the Green Lantern script. Director Martin Campbell previously said he's not interested in tackling another comic book property after the experience of Green Lantern with DC, Marvel or otherwise. With such a rich and lengthy history for the Green Lantern Corps to be explored, it definitely feels like a series on HBO Max is the best place to explore those depths. While not every superhero property needs a multi-episode show to flesh out an origin story, the complexity and nature of Green Lantern and the many characters who have carried that name is something that begs for that type of platform. The most recent sighting of a Green Lantern was in Zack Snyder's Justice League, who almost included John Stewart in the ending before being turned down by WB, and that has certainly reinvigorated fans to see more from the famed Interstellar police force, with or without Ryan Reynolds. Ryan, you don't need to have Green Lantern on a streaming show or a movie. There's no rules. Just because the movie failed, it doesn't mean you can't do a movie. You could have a 3-hour epic Green Lantern movie with, you know, Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, and it would be awesome. But this is a great idea as well. This is exciting as well. They both are. But this is journalism, I'm afraid. You see, Paul, as I said, I like you. But you turned something really positive about this new show, going back to something negative. I don't want to talk about the 2011 movie. I watched the 2011 movie and enjoy it for what it is all the time. I don't want to know. I want you to talk to me about this new DC live action era, about this. This is what I'm doing with my subscribers, and I think some of you like me being so excited and positive. Sometimes we have to talk about negative elements of the DC universe, and that's okay as long as we counter that. And when we're talking about the future, it's important not to keep on going on about the past. Now, I do that sometimes, but here I just want to focus on Green Lantern. The Green Lantern Corps TV series sounds fucking epic. It spans decades and generations. We're going to have lots of iconic Green Lantern characters, and I can't wait to see it. I'm going to read to you what Screen Rant tweeted on a link for an article, and we'll read the article as well. The Suicide Squad is the beginning of the new future of the DCEU. No. One that still has loose ties to the past, but mostly does its own thing. No. Strikes the lighter, more humorous tone WB wants and gives directors real creative freedom. Some directors will have creative freedom. Some will not have so much. Like the Flash movie is a studio picture to realign the whole franchise. So Andy Muschietti and the studio are working together to make that happen. But let's read this article. Let's click the link, because I want to tear it apart. I haven't read it yet, but if that tweet's anything to go by, I'm going to have a feast of a time tearing this to pieces. How the Suicide Squad represents a new DCEU. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is the beginning of a new era of DC films, giving us the first peek of what to expect from the future of the DCEU. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad has but actually, before we read this, let's discuss this, because there was other news yesterday. 4 million homes in the space of 10 days saw James Gunn's The Suicide Squad on HBO Max. Add that with the sponsorship James Gunn's The Suicide Squad being on the streamer brought in, add the subs as well that James would have brought onto the platform with his movie being on the platform, we can say that James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is a very successful movie. You will keep on hearing analysts talking about the box office, but this once, for this movie, the box office is irrelevant. Let's say it together. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is a very successful movie for the DCEU, and a very good one. By Stephen M. Colbert. Right, why doesn't that surprise me? James Gunn's The Suicide Squad represents the beginning of a sort of new era of the DCEU? No. After crashing and burning in an attempt to retrofit Zack Snyder's 5-part story into something else entirely biased, Warner Brothers spent a few years trying to find its way with the DCEU. And James Gunn is a big part of that plan. Well, he is, and he isn't. Now, we don't know if he's going to be part of this Suicide Squad universe from now on, or if he's going to do Justice League movies. We don't know. But he does play a big part. But we won't be able to use James Gunn in the DCEU to at least around end of 2023, 2024. So it's best not to think about him at this time. The origins of the DCEU, as overseen by Zack Snyder, had a very distinctive tone and direction. Yeah. Here's the thing. I love what Zack did, and I've already lost 2 subscribers for being a little bit negative and balanced about Zack, because people don't understand an opinion, and I'm happy to lose more people. I'm here to speak my truth, not yours. But I'm also interested to listen to your truth and react to that. Right, Zack Snyder's DCEU story is beautiful, vast, and the imagery is beautiful. And it's something that should be on an Elseworldy type of story over on HBO Max. It shouldn't be the central universe of a DC extended universe. Not if you want to make Force Awakens money, or Avengers money, or Avengers Infinity War, or Endgame money, right? And it is about money and entertainment. It's everything. So Zack Snyder should have been able to tell an Elseworld story. And it's a great story, but as a central story, it simply doesn't work. But one that saw a lot of division and controversy, leading to Warner Brothers and Snyder parting ways. In the middle of Justice League production, Snyder has said WB seemed obsessed with making the movie funnier. But the resulting attempt to lighten the tone and add jokes in the reshoots with Joss Whedon at the helm certainly didn't work. Right. It's funny that, because he's very biased towards Snyder, we know that, right, Stephen M. Colbert, but I don't really see the point of bringing Snyder into this conversation if you're talking about the future. But there you go. Now, you know, we have to understand that the reason they want a little bit of humour in these movies is because many blockbusters have had humour in their movies going back years, right? Anyway, while the Suicide Squad isn't exactly the foundation of a brand new shared DC universe, it's not. It does help set some expectations for what we can expect from DC films moving forward. No, you're wrong. It sounds like there's a plan for James Gunn to do more movies, so it's clear what to expect there. But there's a number of things the Suicide Squad says about Warner Brothers' new approach to DC filmmaking. It doesn't say anything, by the way. I told you the Suicide Squad is simply a placeholder, which has given Walter Hamada the time and the space to create his interconnected multiverse strategy. Something this guy doesn't want to admit because he's biased. While the DCEU has been in a state of flux, most of the movies coming out haven't been representative of the current Warner Brothers and DC executive teams. The leadership of both WB and DC Films has changed hands a few times, and there was also the acquisition by AT&T, and most projects were greenlit and started production under previous leadership. Aquaman, Shazam, Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 84 either started development prior to the release of Justice League or shortly after, before Jeff Johns stepped down as DC's Chief Creative Officer in June of 2018. Even the Suicide Squad technically started development before Justice League. No. You're wrong. You're wrong. That is a blatant, that is fake news, misinformation. But saw so many script overhauls and director changes that after James Gunn was hired in October 2018 and given virtually free reign over the project, the current iteration is far more a product of the current administration. If you're talking about David Ayer's Suicide Squad, you're right. If you talk about James Gunn's, he hasn't been developing that before Justice League. You're talking nonsense. Warner Brothers and DC waffle between total reboots, soft reboots and just throwing continuity out altogether during this time. So many of the projects coming out maintained a general sense of overall DCEU continuity, although there was no clear through line leading to any sort of major crossover. So very little was set in stone. While the Suicide Squad also follows a similar pattern, it also pushes the boundaries in some new directions with more out there, characters like King Shark, Starro and Ratcatcher 2. One of the most controversial topics in the Zack Snyder era of the DCEU was the use of humour. At one point there was a rumour that DC had an outright no-jokes policy, but Snyder has since said one of his biggest fights with executives on Justice League was over their desire to inject more levity and humour. Detractors also regularly complained of an overall darker tone and less use of bright flashy colours. As I say, when you're doing things for the broader audience and the mainstream, which was the reason Snyder was there, although he shouldn't have been there to serve those people, he should have had an Elseworld to tell a story for the people that wanted to see his story play out. That's what the mistake was from the very beginning. Nearly every DC movie since, other than the non-canon Joker, has pushed the colour tone and humour in that direction. But the Suicide Squad seems to finally be the product executives were asking for, with jokes galore and a giant pink and purple starfish alien as the villain at the end. Yes, I see what you're trying to do, Stephen M. Colbert, but it's not going to work. There were many gags, but there were very serious elements. I cried many times in this movie. So you're wrong. It's not working, Stephen. I'm sorry. The Suicide Squad is still very R-rated, but exactly. But the more light-hearted tone seems to be a bigger deal to leadership at WB and DC, which James Gunn certainly delivered. I think they want a balance, and that's okay. But some people want an authoritative state, want it either one thing or the other. No member of the broader audience wants that. that, listen, you need to service the broader audience to make the real money. I'm sorry about that, but they're the facts of life and capitalism and business. And the entertainment industry is part of that world. Despite being the first film in a new DCEU, The Suicide Squad is in many ways just as connected to what was established in Snyder's tenure when it comes to continuity. Viola Davis, Joel Kinnaman, Margot Robbie and Jai Courtney all return as their prospective characters. Jai Courtney, right, and Rick Flag were both killed off in this film. Gives you a clue what's going to happen in The Flash, right? Anyway, if you're talking about connectivity to Snyder's universe. From the first movie, and acknowledge a shared history, though no specifics are given, and there's no overt retcons to previous films. Superman is referenced but not shown, so it could easily be Henry Cavill's iteration. It is. A lot of fuss was made during production about whether or not Gunn's The Suicide Squad was a sequel or a reboot to Ayer's 2016 Suicide Squad, with some producers calling it a reboot. Well, I think the media called it a reboot. Your very own Screen Rant called it a reboot, but it's not. It's a sequel. It's not a continuing direct sequel, but it's a sequel. Gunn emphasising that people didn't need to see the first movie to understand this one, and the title acting like a brand new film, avoiding any clear sequel titles like Suicide Squad 2, although WB Chairman Toby Emmerich did call it that at CinemaCon in 2019. For all WB's efforts to avoid a clear link to the first movie, then The Suicide Squad ultimately functioning as a loose sequel, it seems WB doesn't want to burn the past films to the ground. Well, here's the thing. They're not totally going to burn them down, but when we get this franchise rebooted, nothing will be forgotten and everything will be remembered, but it is a new beginning. Let's be clear about that. But they also don't want people to think about them too often. It'll be curious to see how this is handled with the release of The Flash, when Ben Affleck and Ezra Miller reprise their roles, suggesting a much stronger link to Snyder's continuity. Well, I've explained that already, Stephen. That at the beginning of the film there will be strong continuity until they reboot the multiverse at the end of the movie. Granted, The Flash is also set to dive headfirst into the multiverse, meaning concepts of canon and continuity are very flexible, but it's going to be hard to outright ignore movies like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, or either version of Justice League. Well, it's not going to be that hard. They don't have to ignore them. They'll still be canon because everything will be remembered and nothing will be forgotten, but they're rebooting. They're starting from scratch. So it won't be something that will have to be referenced. It's a move away without deleting it. Are on screen together, especially when they're set to continue elements of Snyder's plan, such as Affleck's Batman providing Flash his new suit. And that's great, because that gives the fans something from Snyder's universe. But we're still rebooting this franchise, whether you like it or not, Stephen. Ultimately, most members of the general audience might not even think of The Suicide Squad as a new direction for the DCEU. It's not. It's a placeholder. But that may be for the best. The Snyder era of the DCEU never needed to be burned to the ground. In fact, the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League improved the way many people saw Snyder's DCEU installments. The biggest difference with the production of The Suicide Squad is the way James Gunn was given the freedom to make his own movie from the ground up. A liberty many previous directors like Snyder, Ayer and Kathy Yan didn't have to the same extent. No. But let's look at those directors. Snyder is his own worst enemy. He's great. I love his DC movies, but he's his own worst enemy. He won't budge at all, and that's no good when you're working in the confines of studio filmmaking. David Ayer was part of Snyder's vision, so that was problematic as well, and they were shaken after the reaction to BVS. And Kathy Yan couldn't even direct action. What did you expect them to fucking do? And they didn't even choose Kathy. Margot Robbie did. Clusterfuck. If the DCEU's future is truly filmmaker-driven, listen, let me tell you something. This filmmaker-driven bullshit isn't necessarily that important in CBMs, in comic book movies. Why? Well, look at the MCU. How many of those movies are director-driven, apart from James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy movies? Pretty much zero. Are you enjoying them? Do you like them? Yes, you fucking do. I think some DCEU movies can be director-driven, like Matt Reeves' The Batman, but, you know, things like The Flash don't necessarily have to be director-driven. They can be director-driven and studio-driven, because guess what? People can actually work together. Do you get it? Allowing for unique director visions and less studio meddling. This is the problem. This is a person who doesn't understand the entertainment industry or the studio system. I can't fucking give you $70 million or $200 million and let you do it 100% what the fuck you want. It's ridiculous, Stephen. Ridiculous. And less studio meddling, which is heralded as all along. Then things like tone, colour and humour may be flexible, allowing creators to tell a story the way that matches the content. Hopefully the biggest takeaway from the Suicide Squad, which is one of the highest rated movies in the DCEU on Rotten Tomatoes, or of course since the Suicide Squad entered production before the pandemic, a lot of other things may change. The $185 million budget looks far steeper when the post-pandemic box office means it only opens to $26 million domestically. But again, Stephen, you're not being a proper good journalist. You're not talking about what it's making on HBO Max, but that doesn't suit your agenda, does it? Utilising the movie as a growth tool for HBO Max could still pay off. It already has, and you know it. But WB isn't likely to grant budgets of that scale in the near future unless the box office turns around in a big way. Well, they will, because they know that they're going to make lots of money off of HBO Max. So things like, you know, Black Canary will not get $185 million budget, because they'll make cheap stuff that doesn't look cheap, by the way. It's streaming budgets at the end of the day and streaming wages, but it will be awesome and it will work on those platforms. And when we get to cinematic stuff, because we will move away eventually from COVID, and we will get back to the old box offices. And I think next year we will see that, especially with Black Adam, especially with the Batman, especially with the Flash movie. So basically this article, and I suspected as much, was just disguising itself as another biased piece to restore the Snyderverse, which I'm happy to do. I'm happy to be part of that fight, but it's never going to be centrally. And yes, Snyder's universe will be ever present in these movies we see next year. But by the time they reboot the multiverse, we're starting from scratch. Now, how they're going to do that, I have no idea how it's going to look when it's done, but we are moving away from the original DCEU. And to have a cohesive franchise with connectivity, it's the best way to do it. And if that upsets you, and if that makes you press the thumbs down or unsubscribe, you're welcome to. Or maybe you should grow a brain and understand people having different opinions. You have your truth and I have mine. Let's respect each other and stop acting like children. Titans Season 3's Red Hood repeats Nolan's Bane mistake. And this is another article I don't agree with. We're going to read through it and debate it. Many DC fans had a problem with Bane's role in The Dark Knight Rises, not me. And now Titans is doing something similar with Red Hood in Season 3 by Craig Elvey of Screen Rant. Titans Season 3 gives Red Hood the same mistreatment Bane suffered in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises. I disagree. Now streaming on HBO Max, Titans Season 3 has so far earned a more positive reaction compared to previous runs. Jason Todd's transformation into Red Hood deserves a big chunk of the credit for that. Following on from Titans Season 2, where Jason became paralysed with fear after his humiliating loss to Deathstroke, Batman's sidekick tries taking down the Joker by himself, a decision he quickly regrets as the Clown Prince liquefies Jason's body with a crowbar. Reports of Jason Todd's demise were greatly exaggerated, however, as he returns under the new guise of the Red Hood, a blend of DC's Death in the Family and Under the Red Hood comic stories. With his new persona, Titans Season 3 established Jason as an outright villain, cementing his term through the explosive death of Hank Hulk Hall. But Dick Grayson suspects Red Hood has an accomplice, and the truth finally comes out in episode 4. The little crow whispering in Jason Todd's ear is none other than Jonathan Crane. A live-action Red Hood Scarecrow team-up is certainly a tantalising prospect, a formidable blend of brains and brawn, but the partnership also regurgitates a problem Batman fans will remember from Christopher Nolan's 2012 trilogy, Closer to Dark Knight Rises. Is Titans Red Hood the new Bane? No, because Bane isn't the new Bane. The Bane thing was fine with Talia al Ghul, absolutely fine. Bane's presence in The Dark Knight Rises isn't always remembered fondly. It is by me. I liked him, not least because no one could understand him without subtitles. I could understand him. More problematic than Tom Hardy's muffled vocal, however, is how Bane's story ends. Bane is a terrifying and worthy villain for 90% of The Dark Knight Rises running time. His plan begins perfectly, remaining one step ahead of Batman and the GCPD at all times and keeping to the shadows until he decides it's time to surface. Bane then breaks Batman in two, nullifies the police department and successfully removes Gotham City from the national arena. Citizens are terrified by his ruthless displays of power, such as the football stadium bomb, and other villains, including Jonathan Crane, ironically fall under his sway. Though he might not be as magnetising or compelling to watch as Joker, Bane is the best villain for getting things done in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. And that's precisely why audiences were disappointed when the truth about Bane emerged. The Dark Knight Rises final act confirms for a few who hadn't already guessed that Bruce Wayne's latest love interest, Marion Cotillard's Miranda Tate, is actually Talia al Ghul, daughter of Ra's from Batman Begins. Talia is then unveiled as Bane's master, the one truly seeking to corrupt Gotham City, using Bane as a glorified henchman. It was Talia all along. They joke that it was Agatha all along. Shut up, you journalistic corrupt fools. At the end of the day, right, it makes sense that Talia wanted revenge. This revelation retroactively makes Bane seem much less impressive. Well, it may not. Look, he's not the brains of it, but did you really believe he was that smart anyway? Much less impressive. Yes, he broke Batman's back, exactly, and conquered Gotham City, exactly, with an iron fist. But the master plan belonged to Talia, so what? Who was manipulating events from the shadows, so what? And this isn't just an alliance between equal DC villains either. Bane is hopelessly subservient to Ra's al Ghul's daughter. The biggest dog in Gotham suddenly becomes Talia's Rottweiler, so what? Evoking those long repressed memories of Poison Ivy's Bane and Batman and Robin. Nothing fucking like it. Nothing fucking like it at all. Titan Season 3 follows an early similar pattern with Red Hood. In the opening 3 episodes, Jason Todd's Deadpool cosplay is a veritable menace of an antagonist. Red Hood brings the various criminal gangs of Gotham City under his control, instigates a wave of terror by forcing innocent civilians to don the trademark hood and commit horrific acts in his name, then tricks Dick with a switcheroo bank heist. And that's just his opening gambit. As the situation escalates, Red Hood concocts a deliciously evil plan to tear the Titans apart with Hank's death, and almost kills Nightwing when the pair come to blows upon the grounds of Wayne Manor. Much like Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, a swift and unstoppable rise to prominence established Red Hood as a force to be reckoned with. Also, like Tom Hardy's Bane, the credit for those grandiose misdeeds is taken away from Red Hood and attributed to another. As Dick Grayson interrogates Scarecrow, it rapidly becomes apparent that the twisted chemist is the real mastermind behind Red Hood's achievements. The Talia to his Bane, Jonathan Crane must have been the one who devised the bank heist and the intravenous drug delivery system, the Arkham escape, etc. Just as The Dark Knight Rises took the exploits that made Bane a great villain and credited them to Talia, Titan Season 3 shifts glory of Red Hood's awesome early achievements onto Scarecrow. Right, let's look at the Red Hood when he's just a boy, when he's just Robin. Did this kid look clever enough to come up with all this shit? No, it doesn't. Does it make more sense that Jonathan Crane came up with this stuff? Yes, it does. And also, obviously, they want to find a way out of this storyline. So if you paint kind of the mastermind as Jonathan Crane, maybe there's a way Dick can persuade him not to be Red Hood anymore. That's the whole point. Well, on one hand, this makes perfect sense. As I just said, the Jason Todd of Titan Season 1 and 2 can be best described as an idiot, exactly, in superhero clothing. So of course there's a puppet master orchestrating his movements. So what's your problem? In the background, but similar to how Bane didn't feel so scary after The Dark Knight Rises revealed him as Talia al Ghul's attack, not true. Attack dog Red Hood now just feels like a Scarecrow's hide muscle, not true. Crane even accuses Dick Grayson of overestimating Jason, while Dick refers to him as a protege. Short of patting Red Hood on the head and complimenting his outfit, the duo couldn't be more patronising. Scarecrow does concede that the Hank plan was Jason's idea. So, if the Hank plan is Jason's idea, that's pretty smart. What's your fucking problem? But it couldn't be clearer that Crane is the one in control. All of the excitement around Red Hood's Badass Titans introduction dissipates quicker than Hank's insides did over Wayne Manor's carpet. Titan Season 3's Red Hood holds one card up his sleeve that Bane didn't in The Dark Knight Rises. The opportunity for redemption. Nolan pulled his Talia al Ghul twist right in the dying moments of the Dark Knight trilogy, leaving no time to redeem Tom Hardy's villain. No, not all villains need redeeming. And after Blink and You'll Miss It, death courtesy of Catwoman, he was never spoken of again. By contrast, Titan's Red Hood Scarecrow link was confirmed in episode 4, which leaves plenty of time for their dynamic to change. Now that Jonathan Crane has been liberated from Arkham Asylum, nicely done Nightwing, he and Red Hood should be working more closely as Titans Season 3 progresses. And sooner or later, Jason will realise that Scarecrow is exploiting him even worse than Batman used to. The one thing Red Hood needs from his criminal conspirator is fear antidote. But since Jason was cooking the stuff by himself, while Crane remained locked in Arkham, the drug might not be enough for Scarecrow to keep control over Red Hood for long. Like Jesse Pinkman eventually learning to cook blue meth, without Walter White's help, Red Hood could go solo in future episodes. In fact, he could kill Jonathan Crane, couldn't he? Or Jonathan Crane could be the real baddie and Jason Todd could be redeemed. We just don't know which way they're going to go here. Betraying Scarecrow would re-establish Red Hood as the dominant villain in Titans Season 3 rather than just someone else's lackey. He's not. And after a few episodes watching his new mentor in action, Jason might actually become a tactical mastermind without relying on Scarecrow's smarts. Though episode 4 might have dampened that initial wave of Red Hood excitement, it hasn't for me, by revealing his subservient to Scarecrow. Jason Todd's villain could emerge bigger and better than ever by the time Titans Season 3 reaches its end game. And that's why, my friend, it's very important when you're watching a film or a TV show, you don't just judge it on its trailers or its first act or second act, you judge it on the whole fucking journey, which you're not doing. Personally, I had no issue with Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. I could understand everything he says, and I think this journalist is reaching. And finally today, Kevin Feige says never say never about Marvel and a DC crossover. Kevin Feige, president of Marvel Studios, says that fans should never say never to a potential Marvel and DC crossover project in the future. By Kyle Osterman of Screen Rant. Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, recently suggested that there is a possibility for a crossover between Marvel and DC. This could come as a surprise for fans. It's not of either or both franchises. Marvel has seemingly been consistently pushing out quality movies. Alright, let's not get carried away. Ever since the original Iron Man released in 2008, whereas DC and Warner Brothers have approached their shared universe in a different way. Both companies have had recent successes, with Marvel Studios having released Black Widow in July and DCWB having released The Suicide Squad just a few weeks ago on August the 6th. A crossover between the two giants of the comic industry would be one for ages. Fans have wanted to see some sort of connection between the two for a while now. But there would be a lot that would have to take place for it to happen. Marvel Studios has been building their own cinematic universe since Iron Man, and it has been a massive moneymaker for them and Disney. This has proved to be very successful for them, allowing them to even make a splash on Disney+. As well as, meanwhile, DC has been building on their own sort of cinematic universe, having films that cross over with each other while doing elseworld stories such as Joker. Now, Kevin Feige has discussed the possibility of a DC and Marvel crossover. Speaking in an interview with comicbook.com, Feige was asked about this fan favourite topic, and in typical Marvel Studios fashion, said a lot while saying nothing at all. Check out his quote below. Well, look, my standard answer to the things are never say never. I never thought we'd get this far. James has not brought that up. James is deep in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 that will be in filming before the end of this year, having finished the spectacular The Suicide Squad and selling that movie. He's well underway of prep on Guardians 3. Yeah, so he doesn't really say anything. Fred is, sorry, not Fred. Should we start calling him Fred? Kevin Feige is notorious for saying very little about projects involving the MCU and other potential crossovers, so it's no surprise that he has not said much about this one. There will be a lot of logistics that would have to go into this type of crossover between Marvel Studios, Warner Brothers, DC, so that could be a factor. Where are we? I've lost my place. This one, there would be a lot of logistics that would have to go into this type of crossover between Marvel Studios, Warner Brothers and DC. So that could be a factor as to why it could not happen. Has not happened yet. This conversation was sparked due to recent comments from James Gunn, where he mentioned wanting to see a Harley Quinn and Groot crossover. He was pretty much kidding. You people literally just take everything seriously. While Feige did not reveal much in his quote, at least he didn't rule anything out. It's also encouraging that Feige is clearly aware that fans and even James Gunn would love to see it happen. It has not been much of a possibility for years now, so fans should not get their hopes up too much. Both Marvel Studios and DCWB have exciting projects in the future to look forward to in the meantime. Right, my take, as you know, has always been this will happen eventually. This will happen within the next 5 years, I am telling you. They will cross over, but they will cross over big time. But maybe they'll start little crossovers. Maybe with Groot and Harley Quinn at first. Maybe other characters that are not that huge. And then eventually we'll get a Justice League versus the Avengers. So the roadblocks in the way of this, of course, the red tape is obvious, and who runs a film, a huge film. You need probably a couple of people. I think you would need one from Marvel and one from DC to do this, so that would be interesting. You could have like the Russo brothers, who did a great job with the Avengers movies. I'd be down for them doing that. That would be interesting. Some people would be screaming Zack Snyder. That's never going to happen, by the way. But he could be involved in a small level because he started off the DCEU, so he still has to get producer credits on the movies. So this will happen eventually once they've tired out everything else they're doing, and as you can see, there are big plans within DC Live Action and Marvel Studios as well. But this will happen eventually, not right now. I've always believed this is going to happen. This is not an impossibility, and it will happen one day. I still think the future for Kevin Feige is over at DC and WB. I think David Zaslav will do anything to have him running DC Live Action. Now, we'll have to wait and see if I'm right, but something's certainly going on there because there's a lot of Feige people coming over to WB and DC. This has been Saturday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. I will see you again in the next video. Comment down below, like, share, subscribe, tick, slap, whatever you're going to do, that little notification bell so you never miss this perfection. Until the next video, goodbye.